but you can be relentless like that and sometimes be relentless on the wrong things. So I give myself the opportunity to assess those things and be like, do I actually care massively about my physique as much at the moment? Do I care massively about my golf at the moment? Do I care massively about my relationships at the moment? Do I care massively about my career at the moment? And making sure that I'm giving myself to assess how much energy I'm allocating towards those during that period. And success for me is having those weekly check-ins, those monthly check-ins, those quarterly check-ins. It'd been like, you know what, Colin, you're pretty much living in alignment with what you should be doing and what you want to be doing, while of course challenging yourself and not just embracing comfort or ease.
This video is sponsored by Suns. Suns are a men's healthcare brand that offer clinically proven licensed hair loss treatment for less than the cost of a coffee every day. Follow the link in the description and use the code KickoffSessions40 to avail of 40% off your first order. All right, man, let's do this. It's midnight. It's late. It's all dark and misty where I am. It's a bit sunny where you are, to be fair. And let's get into the session. It's funny because I just had my nighttime routine. I want to get all my shit out of the way before we started recording. And Lisa was like, "Are you going to bed?" And I was like, No. I'm about to go in and record a fucking massive podcast." But
yeah,
that's the
it's
scenario.
The sacrifices and the stuff behind the scenes that people don't see when it comes to trying to consistently put out episodes. And your listener base will appreciate it, if not now, but in the future when you've made sure that you've done 150 consecutive weeks, 180 consecutive weeks, 200 consecutive weeks, all these things compound and you'll get a story out of it. Remember that time me and Cole podcasted and it was midnight for me and he'd had an absolutely crazy day, but he managed to move his stuff around during his bathroom renovation to set his mic up and his camera up somewhere that was acceptable. So yeah, it's the stuff in behind the scenes, and equally episodes like this where we're a bit more free and loose and there's a few different topics we're going to dive into that are maybe less about our own stories can be just as valuable to the audience. So mate, super excited to be here and get into this one.
Man, absolutely. And again, I thank you again because I know you're in a fucking building site. So for anyone who's not listening or not watching it, just say there's literally like construction going on around you. So it's been a weird couple of weeks, even like me, like as in I sent out a fucking email today about like guests that are coming up over the next couple of months. But then you still find periods whereby it's just hectic and manic and you're kind of building things and you're doing things. So I think this is just the reality though of when you're doing something for the long term, is that like, you know, short term, I think we all kind of know that short term motivation, you just do it and you think it's high, whatever. But even when you do for the long term, it doesn't necessarily mean that it kind of gets easier and whatever. It's still a shit show at the best times, especially solo businesses, you know?
Yeah, weeks and days where it's harder than normal. Like you were talking about like different like cancellations and stuff like that. And like I find like the grind of approaching guests can be like a thing. Whereas obviously the joy and the fun of researching and having the conversation itself and releasing it, there has to be some hard stuff at the back end. And I think if people were to take anything from that in terms of their day-to-day life or whenever they're scaling their business or their career, unfortunately, even when things are going well and you and I are starting to do really well in the podcast space, there's still like days of like tedium and challenge that you have to go through, even when things are on an upward trajectory already.
Exactly, man. And I think even it's not even like about the numbers and the metrics, or like let's say from a business perspective, like you're getting more sales or whatever, using as an analogy. It's like there's so much more like psychological issues go on. And I even have these conversations with at least my girlfriend a lot of time, is that like no matter how good things are, there's still things that are like very difficult. It's like balance things out, you know, psychologically thinking that you're at a better state and whatnot, you know. How have you been kind of balancing even things like that? Because like from the outset, I obviously wanted to record for many different reasons, which you obviously again, like, you know, continuously. But the one thing that stands out for me, the biggest thing I always find, is the fact that you're always on it. And I sometimes, and this is funny because coming from someone who's on it a lot, I feel that like you're fucking way on it all the time, and it's hugely impressive. You know, it's really admirable. It reminds me very much of the kind of Cameron Haynes, the Jocko Willink kind of examples. And I love that so much. I love that about you so much. That's why we're so close, you know?
Yeah, I look up to people like that, and I always appreciate kind words from people who are practicing like discipline and habits and like routine themselves. I think like sometimes I'll get somebody like either a colleague in work or a friend that I used to know like well at school or something like that, and they're like, "Oh mate, you're smashing it! Like you work so hard," and you're kind of like, "Yeah, I do," but like, of course, relative to like the kind of lifestyle that they lead, it's obviously it's like far removed in terms of like the how deep or how hard I'm pushing in particular areas. But when somebody like yourself, who's obviously pushing on the same path, compliments me, it obviously means that a little bit more, which is nice. Yeah, things are going really, really well. And from the outside, of course, it looks like things have been mad, like the podcast hitting the top 1.5% in the world, like doing that photo shoot and getting some really sick photos and getting in fantastic shape. My career has been, importantly for me in terms of fiscally, that's been great the last couple of months as well. Like the kind of hard work that I did a year ago to build up my customer base through prospecting and meeting people and convincing them to appoint me as an approved supplier, that's coming to fruition now. And the division that I was brought in to grow is now really growing, and it's kind of having that hockey stick moment that we talk about when it comes to some businesses, albeit it's not my own business, but I'm part, like, it's a very much like a driven by myself and my colleague in terms of the sales. So yeah, it's been an amazing period, mate. Like I am definitely strained by it in terms of like, there's like periods where I'm like, right, okay, I really need to like ease off a little bit in particular areas. Like my training after the photo shoot, which is about 3-4 weeks ago at the time of recording, it's not been fantastic, mate. It's been a little bit like I've not had the same push to do the extra couple of reps or to do the set that's a bit harder. Equally, you've not got this goal. I'm super habit driven, so I'm still turning up and I'm still training harder maybe than 99% of people, but I'm not training as hard as I would maybe hold myself to normally because my body's just a little bit beat up because I've just been pushing in so many different areas. But I'm feeling good overall. Calories are back up as well, which buys some freedom. My weight's actually not gained a terrific amount because I've been super active playing a lot of golf, which again, if you're talking about
isn't really a sport, is it?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But your calorie expenditure from playing golf is actually super high. Carrying a bag around 10,000 steps, up hills and stuff like that. It's funny I mentioned playing golf because that's kind of my escapism from podcast, career, and fitness. Albeit it ticks a box from a fitness perspective because you're moving and you're getting your knee up, but it's my escapism away from that. And actually, fantastically, I actually had my best round in about 10 years the other week, which was just so unexpected because I'm playing okay, but then I had a super good round. And it's funny how it differs to a lot of other aspects of my life, golf, because sometimes the work that you put in, there's so many variables to having a successful round of golf or successful score or even a successful shot because of the number of different break points within the swing. It's a lot less controllable. Whereas with like the podcast, career, in terms of business development and sales, and even like fitness, if I tick the boxes, the result normally is going to be good. Whereas with golf, I can practice super hard 2 days a week, hit 50 balls both days, do the drills that I know I should do. And on a Saturday, I get a worse score than the week before because maybe I mistimed like 3 golf shots, which meant I got 3 lost balls, which of course means I've got 6 penalty shots, which means I'm not going to break 8 or 9 over par, which I'm aiming for. It's funny, the juxtaposition, but I guess when you're asking me about how am I managing like what's going on at the moment and everything that's happening, I do have that downtime away from the push with golf, and that's like 3 hours. It's an hour a week practicing. It's 3 hours actually playing golf. Sometimes more than that. The weather's been fantastic here in Glasgow recently, so I have been making sure I've been playing a lot, and it becomes a priority for me.
Yeah, man, I think that breakaway is important, but I think there's something very interesting at play there. As the fact is that when you have reached a target, you've been able to kind of step away from it small bit and then let kind of the batteries recharge and go away. Now I know you're using golf, and that's really good because a lot of people don't have that outlet. For me, I think it's just the fact that I would just kind of spend weekends doing things that are new, like obviously move to Singapore, so trying to like go places, go to markets, and do things that are different, and I can switch off mentally. And I come back on a Monday and I'm like, all right, let's kick it. And I remember last Saturday I was like exhausted because like similar to you, I came out of a dieting pattern, and then moving. I was in Ibiza, I was coming back, I was trying to get my life together and shit like this. I just took like a day off of doing nothing. It was a rest day as well. And then I came back on Sunday morning, then, wake up naturally 7 a.m. Gym is 24 hours, get back in. But I thought it's very interesting there as well, is because for me, from a diet perspective, when I come out of a heavy period and looking good and feeling good, I often feel pretty lost. And I spoke to Joe Delaney about this as well. I was saying that, it's not the fact that I'm binge eating, because there is an element of that. Like I got a 36 pack of Pop-Tarts, and I fucking nailed those. My girlfriend's mom got them for me as a present because she came from the US as a joke, and I ended up nailing all of them over the course of a couple of weeks. But apart from that, for me, it's mainly around the direction. and I kind of don't have direction, you know? So for you, how did that feel when you came out of it? Do you think there's an element of what happens next? Because for you and me, we're both not coaches, you know? It's not like we're trying to be bodybuilders or trying to get on stage or trying to coach other people. It's very much a complementary thing around their career, which is what a lot of people should kind of maybe aspire to, is have a healthy career with your fitness aspirations. So kind of what do you think about that? Like after, is there kind of that slump period?
There's a come down. There's a come down, like a genuine come down. Particularly with like you coming back from a Ibiza holiday, me dropping off after being at a photo shoot with 100 other people, lots of them actually telling me amazing stuff. Like, I listened to your podcast on my steps and my cardio getting lean for this shoot. And then the week after that, we had an actual after party at a nightclub in Glasgow called The Sanctuary. And we had an outdoor area from like 6 p.m. to like 10 p.m. at night. And in an outdoor area of a nightclub, obviously you can talk a lot more than when you're inside and the tunes are on. And people there, when their lips are loosened by the alcohol, were telling me some really heavy stuff about podcasts of mine that they'd listened to and they'd taken stuff from into other areas of their life, whether that was breakups or passing away of loved ones, or like even just improving on particular areas of their life when it comes to like sleep or habits. And I was like, wow, this is quite heavy. So I had this come down effect from losing the goal of getting ruthless shape for this particular date in June, and also the come down effect of like coming off the back of like so many people being involved in the same journey as you, but also looking to you within that journey as like a support for them. Even though I wasn't a coach within the program, I was like one of the more experienced members of the program, and people kind of look to me for advice and also using my content to help them get through it as well. So the come down off the back of that was really interesting. And I am now considering whether I set some sort of new goal. I haven't actually set any particular performance goals yet, but my strength is starting to go back up, obviously, as the calories have gone a little bit up again. And I'm doing less walking, albeit I wasn't doing any cardio. When you start to walk like 20,000 steps a day, it does take a little bit out of you, particularly for things like deadlifts or front squats, where you're just fatigued. Your hammies and your quads and your glutes and everything like that, and your joints around your hip are just a little bit like, oh my god, like you feel like you're running a marathon and then you're trying to lift like a powerlifter.
And man, I took that from you as well. So like I cut after I was on your podcast, or one of them anyway, I cut doing cardio and I moved to that step range and I worked up to around 14,000 steps. But every day, right, I'd wake up and my hips would be fucked, right? I'd go into the gym and I'd wake up first thing and I'd be in pieces, no foam roller or anything. And I was like, what is going on here? Obviously, we're training legs and stuff, and things were going really well. And it's definitely the best approach.
Did you adapt to the pain?
Oh no, I loved it. Yeah, of course. No, I did. Sorry. I meant. Oh no, of course I did. Sorry. But what I'm trying to say is that it was interesting to see that even though you're not pounding a fucking treadmill 24/7, like some people preach, you can get around it from other aspects, burn your calories that you need.
100%. Me and you can use that time walking to research podcast guests, to create social media content, to have a phone call with a friend. Whereas if you're on a treadmill blasting it or on a rower or whatever, there's a level of like you aren't able to look at your phone at the same time, and that sometimes is really good for people to get away from that. But when the goal is literally hold on to as much muscle tissue as possible, hold on to like my strength to be able to hold on to that muscle tissue, walking is generally so good for you. It's good for your body, it's good for your mind, and you can multitask during that period as well into different areas of your life, which most of the people that listen to development podcasts like this will be like, oh, well, I probably need to double up on the time that I've got available to me and make the most of it. So when you are expending calories on a cut, when you're walking, there's so much other stuff that you can do at the same time and be like, oh, well, I'm actually killing two birds with one stone here.
Yeah, definitely, man. So you came out of that kind of set more targets, or you're looking to kind of set more targets. But now I suppose what's the kind of view, like, as in, from your perspective, like, is there an element of you got to be very careful? Like, one of the questions I got now around this was around, kind of not necessarily around that binge eating, but maybe having a negative relationship around food. Was there that kind of element for you, do you think? Or was it more you're kind of, you're used to this?
Yeah, I'm very used to it. I think that's something that a lot of people forget when they maybe look at the processes that I go through on Instagram and they see how lean I get. When I'm dieting on like, I think the lowest I went was 2,800. That's not realistic for a lot of people. But it's because I've been in the game for a very long time. I have a high amount of muscle mass. I have a high level of metabolic flexibility with that as well. It's very difficult for people to relate to that. Don't get me wrong, hunger's relative. So I was hungry by the end, because if you've been shoveling down 4,000 on your bulk, minus 1200, you are going to be hungry because it's all relative, because your body's used to a certain level of saturation in nutrition, albeit when you're eating 4,000, some of it is like a lot less nutrient dense, a lot less filling. You are still hungry. So I definitely was still hungry, but touch wood, I haven't had any challenges around binge eating off the back of this cut, or even like the last really hard cut that I had. But equally, if you finish your calories for the day, which mine are up again at like between like 3,400 to 3,500, and I'm kind of roughly maintaining weight a little bit. Maybe it's moving up a little bit, which is kind of perfect for me at the moment, because I don't want to stay as lean as I am, because it's not that comfortable. Of course, sometimes you finish at the end of the day and you're like, you know what, I'll just have an extra squares bar, or I'll have a little bit of extra cereal, or maybe I'll have some extra dark chocolate. Again, that's kind of like good sources, but that's because my environment is designed to not have lethal Pop-Tarts, which are going to wipe me out.
Man, 100%.
But I can completely have a conversation with myself where it doesn't matter if I have an extra 200-300 calories, doesn't matter if I actually have 500 calories. Ultimately, I'm not going to be in front of a camera in my pants again for a long time. The only time I'm going to have to like hold myself accountable is to myself. And yeah, so there's been flexibility from that perspective in terms of having a little bit more. But equally, if you feel you're susceptible to that kind of thing, one, get your calories up faster to give yourself more fullness and like less temptation. But also, and this is not advice for somebody who has a genuine binge eating disorder, which you need to go and see and seek professional help for, just making sure that your environment is designed where you aren't exposed to massive temptation all of a sudden. Because if you've ruled that out for 12 weeks, 16 weeks, however long your cut's been, of course you're going to be like massively tempted by that being in there again. And environment design is a huge input to our habits. One of the habits I have, if I want closure to my evening, I leave the table, leave the kitchen, leave the dining room or the living room, wherever I'm eating, and I go and brush my teeth, because it's closure. It's fine. It's like finality to the end of my day. Because who wants to brush the like, we're busy fucking guys. Who wants to brush their teeth twice? Nobody. You don't want to brush your teeth twice in like 20 minutes. What's the point? Like, you're just wasting time. We've far too much on. Equally, eating like a bar of chocolate or like a donut or something like that on top of like a freshly like clean teeth, it's just not as pleasant, is it? So
that's fucking disgusting. It's simple things like that, man. And what I always think as well is I always listen to the Mike Thurston approach originally for that. So brushing your teeth was in there, was like how they're going to set these areas. Was other things was like carbonated water. If you do find yourself being like, I need more, just like, sparkling water, get it into like even like extra bit of veg, like as in if you are more hungry. And this is what I am now at the moment as well, is that, I'm walking a lot, I'm training a lot, I'm swimming a lot. Actually, I have a fucking massive pool, so I'm trying to swim for 20 minutes a day. I can't hold my breath for half of it, like, but I'm trying to like get there. But as a result, my fucking hunger is just through the roof. So I'm trying to like supplement that by literally eating so much more veg, peppers, onions, everything, and it's just kind of working in tandem, and it's kind of on like a nice kind of it's a better relationship with it, and then performance is better. My test levels are increased, because I say, man, if you got your test levels done at the very end of it, you'd be in the fucking floor. Like, I was grumpy as fuck. I was all over the place. And as you said about working, like when you're working so much, it just drains from other areas of your life to begin with. And then you add in training, which is meant to be net positive, but it's actually negative towards the end. So they're just things to be.
It's net positive normally, but it's negative because it's at such a level of extremity, as you said.
Exactly. You know what I mean? And it's just taking the fucking piss, you know what I mean? This is what happens. I want to discuss as well around maybe around how you're looking at more future things for opportunities wise. So as you said, you're just busy guy, same myself. I think as things have gone on recently, maybe you might agree with this, is that I've noticed that there's more opportunities kind of popping up. Like this, you might meet people, or you want intros to people, or there might be certain kind of services or whatever you could eventually offer. And I find myself extremely stressed. As you look towards like, the end of 2022 and as we're planning for it, how are you looking at opportunities, and like how are you kind of picking what you want to do these days? Is there more things you want to kind of go ahead with and launch, or are you kind of sticking with your podcast, just your podcast, and leaving it at that?
Such a difficult question to answer, and I'm always very good at staying narrow but deep on the things that I've like indexed on over the years, because that's what's paying off. But I also know that I need to be open to exploring new opportunities, particularly if they are ones that give me more fulfillment, or even ones that give me greater revenue. And I've I've had an email list now for about 2 years, and I have a kind of loyal email subscriber base that love my content on a weekly basis, and I actually really enjoy writing as well. I used to write longer Instagram posts when the platform rewarded you more for that as well.
Yeah, now it just
And
takes from you.
yeah, it's terrible. Yeah, let's not even get started.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really enjoy doing that. So I am keen to like write a guide that would be supported digitally as well. So there's probably a mixture of things that I'll do. So one would be like either a 3 or a 5 pillars of progress guide, which would be like different areas of development you can have within your life that I've noticed within my lifestyle. And then the other thing that I'll do coming up for 150 episodes in the podcast is I'll probably do like 15 lessons of 150 podcast episodes, because and I know we've had some like incredible conversations and incredible things that you've learned during that period. So distilling those down into 15 different lessons would be really cool. So I could do that as like a digital guide in terms of like a written digital guide, and I could support that with like an audio discussion in terms of me distilling that lesson down, and then I'll do like a video like using a clip from that guest potentially, which would be a cool thing. So that would be a cool way to give back to my audience some value, but also help me to generate a service or a product off the back of this massive platform that I've now built with Instagram and the pod.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, man, because like if you're going to do something, especially because what we do is so social, you have to be very particular about what you pick, because when you do it, you have to commit the fuck to it. That's this the whole thing, is that like you can't be like, oh, I'm just launching this. Like I remember seeing guys like over the last like year being like, oh, like I'm chief marketing officer of this new NFT platform or this new like Web 3.0 coin, and I remember just being in my head being like even if you made money in the short term, you're not going in the long run, but in the short term, it's just not worth it if you're not going to stick with it, because future state, this is going to come back to burn you. So I'm very selective of what I do. And even when I'm speaking to people, like as in like I want to commit to something and I want to do something that I'm going to go the whole way through it. So if I'm speaking to just kind of like one of my mates, I don't want to spend fucking 2 hours plugging his ear in on something that I could potentially not go off and do because there's a better opportunity over time. So I think it's about that kind of self-selection. And I would just kind of advise even for younger people like that. Even when I'm coaching a lot of the time now, a lot of people are very interested in moving from the career that I've kind of had into more that kind of online space. And it's kind of like
Yeah.
a nice kind of niche to be in, because it's guys being like, well, you're working really hard in your day job and now you're doing stuff on the side. Maybe we want to do that. But I'm always like, get the fucking meat and potatoes out of the way, man. Focus in on 1-2 different things and then go balls deep in it. And I even want to start things soon and do other things. But you got to pull from one end and then put it into another end. You don't have this
There's only so
unlimited
much
amount of time.
bandwidth. We've only got so much bandwidth or energy to allocate towards things. And if you pulled away from the podcast and your career consulting or even your podcast consulting, which already like I've named a lot of things that you do.
Exactly.
If you started to pull energy from them and put them into other things, then does your career suffer? Does your fitness suffer? Does your relationship suffer? Does the podcast suffer, which is probably one of the big things that you want to index on because you put in a lot of work already? To strip back some of the work that you've done on that would be doing it a disservice to some extent. Equally, you cannot fall prey to the sunk cost fallacy. So if, for example, you're like, actually, this new opportunity, albeit I think it might be the new shiny thing that attracts me, is it actually the thing that really matters to me now? So I do need to pull energy from somewhere else and allocate it towards it. So it's a very interesting battle to have back and forth. But I think there's lots of different frameworks to help you make those decisions. But equally, I do think, and this isn't my personality type, but some people can get shiny object syndrome and be like, fuck, I really need to get involved into this. And like you named NFTs there, which, goodness me, that was certainly a bubble that some people have been badly burnt by. I saw, is it, what's one of the platforms that you can buy on?
OpenSea.
OpenSea made like 10% of their staff redundant or something like that because they had a drop in revenue.
Man, fucking Coinbase's NFT platform did 4 ETH in volume in one day. It was the lowest like ever on an exchange. That's like the equivalent of like €5,000 essentially.
It's nothing. Yeah.
In
It's
one day.
absolutely
Bear
mad.
in mind, it cost something like 625 million to produce the platform, and they did 4K in a day volume. Obviously, like it's gonna come and go, and I still am very, very, optimistic about crypto as a whole, and I do have a very, big belief in it. But like, you just have to take these things for reality at the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it started to run before it could walk. Elements of it,
Yeah.
like I'm
Yeah.
very, very bullish on crypto as well. Like a third of my investments are in cryptocurrencies,
It's probably same, yeah.
across my portfolio, with stocks and shares and ETFs and funds, and then property making up the rest. And it's funny how I could spot the bubble because I've been involved in crypto for maybe like just over like a year by that point. So when people were getting super carried away with it, I was recognizing elements of when I first encountered Bitcoin, I first encountered Ethereum, I first encountered XRP, or I was like, oh wow, like I'm super excited by this. And I was like, oh, this is like got so many red flags around it. Like proper, really sleazy influencer marketing and celebrities who had no idea about the space, but straight away were producing a coin or a JPEG or like just really, really naughty stuff that you were like, oh,
This is things you need to learn from, man. You know, just like it's that approach, like, because like the only thing stopping you from becoming that influencer is just a fucking number after how many followers you have. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's just like the number on it. You know, it's the attitude that comes around it. Because why I said this to you as well, because you're obviously going to be getting these opportunities for sponsorships and stuff, and it's the same premise you need to apply. And this way goes back to values, man. A lot of stuff goes back to values and principles. And like you're a hardworking dude. A lot of my audience are young guys who did the slogs in universities or have put the time into building businesses. You know, they're looking for that kind of edge. They're looking to take that kind of step further, and that's why it's very nice that we've been able to build this kind of platform. But what I'm trying to say here is that, like, when you put yourself in this, you know, you want to kind of go with the right values and the right principles and say, okay, this is something that aligns to me and I think it's going to see good opportunity. Because when I was younger, man, I was like, you know, I'm going to do fucking anything that makes me cash. Like, I'll do anything. I'll fucking, if it's flipping burgers and starting like a burger company, I'll do it. But for me, it was just like, but then over time, I'd done so much of doing that and I was like, oh, this is irrelevant, you know? So I'm thinking exactly in that space, that podcast space, the kind of fintech space, because like I have so much like part of me in product and fintech that it's kind of like it's like a bigger kind of mission, I suppose. I would put it that way. But what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say here is that you got to be kind of focused on it, you know.
Mate, it's really funny you bring up sponsorships as well because, like you say, opportunities do open up as the podcast grows, but also my Instagram grew a long, long time ago now. It's kind of plateaued for the last few years, which is fine by me because I'd much rather people listen to my podcast and had greater impact through conversation I'm having with experts than they found a photo of me in my top off and a kind of one-off caption. I can give you more I can give you more value than that. But I got offered like loads of different like deals and like a 10% discount code for this t-shirt and we'll give you a 3% kickback on whatever. And you're like, goodness me, like if I sell my soul at this point, the credibility will be so much less. So I really held off on loads of different supplement brand offers until I got my protein. And that was the deal that I did. And that's been my longest running sponsor for well over 3 years now that I've been with MP. And the value of that's really, really high to my audience because they get a good discount on a product that they know and trust and they would use anyway. So it's kind of like a no-brainer. So like
Bro, I gotta tell you a funny story about that. So I completely agree with you, and I fucking used your discount when we were in when I was going to Ibiza. But basically, I got to Singapore, and obviously Singapore is super expensive, but it's expensive for like random shit. So I'll give you an example. Like Uncle Ben's basmati rice, $125, but regular rice, $1. Okay, it's like weird, right? So I was
branding.
like, yeah. So I was like, it's a branding thing, it's imports thing, right? So I was like, gonna get to Singapore. I never told you this now. I was like, I'm gonna get to Singapore, gonna get Colin's fucking discount, gonna get a whack of protein, like good because they have a distribution center here in Singapore. And I was like, yeah, we're sorted, whatever. I went online, and I saw a 5 kg pack of like vanilla protein. Guess how much?
And I don't know what the dollar
I guess how much in pound. Guess how much in pound?
like it's expensive, yeah.
£450
Shit.
for 5 kg, man. So obviously, like there must be some import tax or something, but man, like that's across the board. Like I'm using Optimum Nutrition now because they for some reason they're quite cheap here, but they're still obviously super expensive. But I thought it was so funny because like all those brands are just crazy expensive. This is just a side thing, but man,
Well, no, but like the price of protein's gone up anyway because of the like food shortages across the world, which are just getting more and more alarming. But
yeah,
Yeah, like you say, certain countries, certain
regions.
imports, yeah, exactly, just absolutely mad. Like not inflation, that's not the right term, but like the increase in price border to border. You're like, how is this a thing? Like the rice example is even worse though, isn't it? Because it's
Yeah,
literally like what
it's
125x.
it's literally fucking rice as well at the end of the day. You know what I mean? So it's a bit mad, man. It's about keeping those kind of standards up, you know. And that's kind of the main thing. What I want to ask as well is around like success matrix. So obviously with like a bit of a tech background, everything for me is driven by metrics. Um, rightly or wrongly, but you define success through metrics. Whether it's not necessarily downloads, but it's just overall like engagement, increase in revenue, or it could be daily active users, weekly active users, general metrics. And then that's from a business concept. And maybe that's not always the best way to look at things. So you also want to look at relationships built and whatnot. And then from a fitness perspective, there's obviously health. You know, you don't want to be looking at it from fucking body fat perspective. How are you kind of looking to define kind of success as you go forward?
Wow, it's deep, isn't it? Just like you said, quantitative but also qualitative metrics as well. So, like levels of happiness as well. So, yes, we
Mhm.
can use loads of different data when it comes to, yeah, the podcast is growing by X number of downloads this month. I've released an extra 2 episodes because I managed to go beyond just my weekly upload schedule. Whatever like metrics you can use to do that, that's fantastic. But were you pleased with the content that you created? Were you pleased with the conversations that you had? Were you happy or content with how you spent your time? Whether that was seeing friends for their birthday because you had the financial freedom to go to like I've got a 30th birthday in August, and it's a surprise party for my friend. He doesn't listen to podcasts actually, which is funny, so he won't hear this. It's in Manchester, and am I happy or pleased that fiscally I have the ability to go and stay in Manchester for 2 nights and go out for his birthday and pay for the train up and down and not be worried about that? That's an interesting metric to measure your success by as well, like having financial freedom to make relative choices within your day as well. Am I in good enough shape where if I do decide to introduce alcohol in that particular weekend, that it won't massively sabotage how I look and feel about myself? That's
Mhm.
pretty cool as well, isn't it? In terms of like, am I content with that as well? And content has two sides to it, doesn't it? It's got like content where like you're this lazy content guy who doesn't push or doesn't ever like experience
Comfortable.
discomfort. Yeah, comfortable. Yeah. Or are you content that you are pursuing the right things and pushing when you need to push and pulling off when you need to pull off? And that for me is something I've toyed with a lot. And it's a big reason why I actually gratitude journal now as well. Have done for about
Mhm.
2.5 years. It's been very helpful for me to have like either daily, but more often not weekly is when I go a bit deeper in terms of I have stop points where I can make an assessment. Am I living my life in line with the values that I want to live in? Because I'm somebody who's super habituated. Like you know this now from being acquainted with me for a few months and us getting on really well. You know I'm quite relentless, but you can be relentless like that and sometimes be relentless on the wrong things. So I give
Mm.
myself the opportunity to assess those things and be like, do I actually care massively about my physique as much at the moment? Do I care massively about my golf at the moment? Do I care massively about my relationships at the moment? Do I care massively about my career at the moment? And making sure that I'm giving myself to assess how much energy I'm allocating towards those during that period. And success for me is having those weekly check-ins, those monthly check-ins, those quarterly check-ins. It'd been like, you know what, Colin, you're pretty much living in alignment with what you should be doing and what
Mm.
you want to be doing, while of course challenging yourself and not just embracing comfort or ease.
Yeah, man, because that's so fucking interesting. I always have that consideration too, because like it's so weird. It's kind of like you can work really hard, and even today is a perfect example. Like poor night's sleep, very poor night's sleep. Woke up like a thunderstorm, went to the gym, got back, and I was like on my laptop 9 a.m. 9 to 2 straight, and then I was like, "Fuck, I need to get a walk in." I went for a walk, came back at 3, now 3 to 1 a.m. straight. So what is that? That's literally like 16 to 18 hours work, and I was like, "Fuck, things are moving, like, things are going really well." But I was like torched, and then conversely, yesterday I went for a lunch slash dinner because it took so long for like 3 hours with Simon Reeve, who you should definitely get on your show, by the way.
Yeah.
And we were sitting down chatting for ages, and I was just like, it was a different way to frame things that came out of that conversation yesterday, just so like relaxed and ready for work and just nice and calm and whatnot. And then today, things were moving in the right direction from a business perspective, but I was still at odds with the perfect equilibrium. And like, I hate using the word balance. I don't even want to use the word here, but I think it's just about, you know, going balls deep at something and really committing to it. But because you're going super long term and like we're thinking like mega long term, you kind of have those periods where boy, you're not too tight on yourself about your diet, and you want to go and have a bit of bit of relaxation with your friends or go out and do whatever you want. Kind of having a small bit of that dropped in occasionally is really good, and that's why I went to Ibiza, man, for a week, because I knew I could go to Ibiza and get back on it the second I came back. Because like, we've all been there. We've been at like raves or been at like events, and you're looking around and being like, this is people's actual lives. Like, is going out at the weekend,
That
getting
haunts
fucked
me.
up,
Yeah, that
getting
haunts me.
smashed, man. And that's the biggest issue, is that like you can draw those lines, like, and that's why when you meet some sick cunts out, every once in a while you meet like a sick person, and he has his shit together. He's out having a bit of fun. He could be in Ibiza, and then he's getting back to it, later on. But he's got to be careful. And that quote is, I remember hearing it early on. My best mate Tom said it to me. He's like, "You don't want to make your college habits your life habits," and I've seen it happen, man, continuously.
Yeah, it's very easy to make your like that younger self where life is a lot more carefree and just trying to maintain that, albeit with like an adult job. Yeah, super silly. And I also think it's a lot of that's like got escapism as well. So a lot of these people that are maybe doing that are escaping from jobs or careers or businesses that they don't really care about and don't really get any positive feedback loop from. They don't have the passion, the purpose, the fulfillment, which you use as one of your models
Mhm.
for deciding how you should be spending your time. So no wonder it's much easier and more comfortable to get out your head and escape from these situations on a regular basis. And we even see people doing that on a nightly basis with Love Island and Netflix. And that's not to shit on those particular outlets, but if you feel like you need those outlets on a regular basis to escape from the tedium or the mundane existence that you have during your day, then would it not be much easier to not escape for 2 or 3 hours that night and instead build something that you could escape from the 9 to 5 in that period as well? And this is coming from somebody who's very passionate about his corporate career, and I don't feel
Mhm.
I need the escapism at night from my 9 to 5 because I actually enjoy the time that I spend, but I am still looking to build something on the side because I care about that too. But I do think there's a big element when you look at the people who maintain their college habits, which is the lovely phrase which your friend Tom uses. Could you spend your time better where you would have less of a need to do that on such a regular basis, and instead you could be hyper selective of when you do escape?
Yeah, man. I think, and it's funny because like when you're working on something that's difficult, like there's pain in like everything. And the short clip that Chris Williamson put up of Jocko the other day, he was saying that, like, that it's just like no matter what you're doing is difficult. It's gonna be difficult no matter what. But it's about picking those right battles. And even like even on like a personal level, like, as in, I was thinking the other day, I was like, if I didn't do what I do all the time, I'd have loads of fucking time on my hands. Be able to do whatever I want, sleep long, sleep longer, sleep at normal times and stuff. But like the battle and the enjoyment and the purpose comes from the difficulty. It's from doing the challenge. And there's nothing better than breaking through that little period. And it's ongoing, because like for me, it's all like hurdles, just continuous hurdles. You get down, you get through one of them, it's the next one. It's either the same size or slightly bigger. You're kind of working through them slowly. So like I will. Well, I'm not going to release anything now, but maybe in the next 6 months I'll come out with kind of an announcement of something that I'm kind of trying to build at the moment, just kind of scoping out. What I was thinking the other day was, I was like, some things that I have on my mind or some things on my plate are like so complicated and so difficult. And it's not about like, oh, simplifying business. Like, some things are just fucking difficult to build. There's no two ways about it. But I always think like, if I've done, the competing, if I've done the college tuition, the difficult jobs, the building a podcast, surely I can do the next one. It's just like the levels. It's like fucking Mario Kart. Like, it's like, you've done this one. Fair enough. The next one could be huge and could be very difficult, but at least you're moving towards something that you're trying to do, and you might not be able to crack that level, but I guarantee you have a better attempt at doing it because you've done the other ones as well.
Yeah, exactly that. And we do definitely adapt to the stimulus that we put our bodies under, like, or our minds
Mm,
under, and our careers under. Because look at how we've grown in the gym. Like, if 19-year-old Darren got given the weights that you're throwing around just now, and the intensity that you train at just now, he'd be broken. Whereas, and in the same way that 21-year-old Darren, fresh out of college, if you had a working day like you had today, you wouldn't be back. You'd be like, nah, I'm out of this. So we do adapt to the pressures that we put ourselves under, and we do build up to that. Like we gain calluses, as our friend David Goggins would say. We gain like reps under pressure, and we build time under tension, and we build levels of ability to put ourselves in these positions more often and grow with that. And of course, with that means we need to set more stretching targets, more stretching activities like you're planning on doing and like I'm planning on doing.
Yeah, man. It's about like appreciating now and then always moving forward as well at the same time. I want to ask you about risk, risk from different angles. But I suppose, firstly, you have that kind of corporate role similar to myself. What do you think are the biggest risks to like your kind of success? Maybe in your podcast, or maybe in your corporate job at the moment.
Biggest risk to success in my corporate job.
Yeah, kind of like from your influence, from your input.
Okay, cool. Well, we have extremely stretching sales targets. We want to grow the division by over 100%. So that's 3-figure growth, which is pretty aggressive. And we want to do that not just with revenue, but with profit and margin as well. So sometimes it's really easy to grow a business if you are buying the business. And by that, I mean, you'd be doing it at like really low margin, really low profitability. So of course, I'm going to win stuff from my competitors. I'm going to win new clients by being the cheapest show in town. But I might be like doing it to the bare bones and not making any profit from it.
Yeah.
So that it's a risk when you're trying to win a massive new number of customers to maintain the profitability of the business as well. Although importantly, myself and my colleague that I've been brought in to grow this division at the company that I'm at are very focused on the overall profitability of the group and the division that we're within. So we're incentivized not just to go out there and sign business willy-nilly that would in a year's time actually be pretty low profit. Instead, we've got like a revenue target, but also a contribution profit target, which means that you behave in a way that's ethical, but also like sustainable for the business as well. So a risk for my corporate career is that you don't quite get the balance right between those two, because you can be too conservative and be like, oh, well, we really want to write this at a particular margin and a particular profitability. So we lose it because we're not willing to go in a little bit more aggressive just to get our name with that client. And maybe win a future project with them, or a future deal with them, or a future approved supplier status with them. So that's always a risk within my corporate career. Within the podcast, risk, it's so grooved as a habit now. It's not a risk that I'm going to stop in terms of like I'm not going to get to 150 and be like, okay, that was a great innings, guys. Thank you very much for coming along the journey with me. That's me. I'm probably going to keep recording an episode a week for as long as I can see in the future, until something massive substantially changes within my lifestyle. I want to keep improving the quality. So since speaking to you, I ended up on StreamYard, which is the platform that we're recording this on. So the audio quality and the clip quality has been better. I've invested in a video editor who is helping me out with my clips, which I'm using for social media and reels. And that's been fantastic help as well. Other risks that I can think of within the podcast space, I would probably say there's always the risk that I would not maintain my guest quality as well. And that's a big battle that you probably have too, Darren, like making sure that when you have a Joe Delaney, that you follow up with high quality guests off the back of that as well, or at least high quality conversations, because you and I both know that you can have like a really high quality named guest and then be good, but you also have conversations with people who people have never heard of, but they are an absolute savage within their space that is such a genius. Like you and I have both had Dr. Daniel Crosby on our podcast, brilliant guy, total expert. But if you're not in the world of behavior finance, you're kind of like, oh, I've never heard of Daniel Crosby. And you're like, you're going to want to listen to this
100%.
episode. You're going to want to listen to that episode as much as you listen to Joey D on both our podcasts. This guy is legit as well. So it's very funny. So the risk is like you don't maintain your guest quality over a period of time because you set such a high standard for yourself. But I don't see that as a risk now, because with the size of the podcast, I'm finding it easier to get guests on than ever before. And
the issue is the multi-channel though, man. The multi-channel between like LinkedIn and Instagram, because you get kind of a similar audience or guess as me, is that like someone who kills it on LinkedIn, which is like Justin Welsh. If you're a follow, I'm trying to get him on my show in the next couple of months. We've had a couple of conversations, interactions. Someone like that who is just like mega, like he's just a fucking mecca of LinkedIn. Like if you want to grow a business, like he'll tell you how to do it, right? But then he obviously doesn't hold up on Instagram. And then obviously like someone like Joe Delaney is Instagram, But obviously, like if you had an audience that's built off LinkedIn or even Twitter, man, might not
I know.
even know them that much, So there's always that kind of like balance. But I think this is it. I know we need to finish up in about 5 minutes, but one thing I want
Yeah,
to
don't worry.
finish up on is this: is that I've like I have a lot of like weird, like retrospective, like thoughts about podcasting. Because for anyone that doesn't have a podcast, why it's so interesting is because if I have a YouTube channel, it's just fucking me and a camera. And it's just like record a video, done, and like keep pounding it, thumbnails, SEO, just keep the foot on the gas, right? But with a podcast, there's like this language in the industry, and you have to like to get to interview this person, you need to do so many episodes, and you also need these metrics and whatnot. And there's always like a language going on, and it's also so difficult to produce content because you need someone to interview with, right? So I've kind of learned that there's like layers to the game. There's layer one, which is like your Joe Rogan, is your top tier. So like your tier one is like Joe Rogan, Call Her Daddy. I'd say like just like two of them. Tier two then would be like your Lex Friedman on that kind of tier. Tier three then would be tier two would be like Stephen Bartlett, Lex Friedman. Tier three would be like Chris Williamson now, who's like, at that really kind of big kind of breakthrough, and that guy James Smith as well. Tier like 3 and 4 would be like you, who's in that stage now, who's going up to that Chris Williamson size, because you're getting towards those types of guests, those live type of guests, and you're always kind of moving. And then I would be slightly behind that bracket then. So, and then there's obviously the beginner stage then and going down. But it's almost as if you need to like go through every different channel,
Yeah, it's
and
mad.
it takes years. I mean, fucking years, man, to go through it. Unless you've come in at, I'm Lex Friedman and I'm an AI Stanford fucking AI dude, or lecturer, should I say?
Yeah, it's totally different, isn't it? Like, obviously, people look at Rogan, they're like, "Oh my god!" But like, bear in mind, he's done like thousands of episodes, so you're kind of like, he's done both. One, he's like got the profile as a comic, and he's super funny, and he's super good at what he does. But he also has just done so much. And like Chris Williamson, who's tier 3, he released his 500th episode recently, and he also had the background of being a successful business owner and entrepreneur as a nightclub owner. He went on Love Island, so he had a large social following. So he tried to pull some of them. He tried to pull some of them across to listen to the podcast, which is fucking harder than it looks, by the way. Because like with 15,000 Instagram followers, you would think I would have 15,000 potential podcast listeners. But
man, Love Island fucking watchers and podcast and self-improvement podcasts, they just don't go. They're just like, zoom,
it's mad. Mate, even my audience who were like mostly built through like fitness and like me balancing my like trying to pursue peak performance in my career with my my fitness goals, they don't automatically come across and listen to long form content because people don't have patience, and they like there's a reason that the guys at the top of the podcast game have the vast majority of the listens. And it's interesting you use that tiering, because that's kind of like how I see it. Like there's like a top 0.5%, there's a top 1%, and then there's a top like 1.5%, which I'm in. I was in the top 2% for a while, and it took like tens of thousands of downloads to break through that next tier. And then to get to the tier above that, it's probably going to take hundreds of thousands of downloads. And then to get to the tier above that, it's going to take millions of downloads, because there is such a hegemony of like dominant podcasts. And then I would probably say outside of that, like you say, like you're pushing into that top 2% now, you're pushing up as you go through that. And then beyond that, there's like loads of beginners, and there's guys that are getting like talking like tens of listens that are producing podcasts. Like 80% of podcasts are getting like less than 26 downloads a week, because that's what's happening. And they all fall off as well, because it's
man, they all give up after 10, after 15, you know what I mean? The amount of ones.
So difficult, like keep going, yeah, it's super difficult. It's easy for us to say like over 100 episodes in each, but ultimately you do need to just ride the wave of it. Do you not?
No, man, I was saying this to Simon Reed yesterday. I was saying that like it's just about who sticks in the game long enough, because you're going to get recognized, you're going to get those big shows, because like the whole idea is like it's like the leverage game, and this may seem like
you need to be good as well, or whatever. That's such a caveat, isn't it?
You need to be fucking good. Yeah,
I've seen so many people be like, "Oh, I'm going to stick it out," and like unfortunately you're just not very good at podcasting. You don't prep, you interrupt your guests, you like your guests are like really not interesting people as well. So like it's funny, like there's like my brother says this to me sometimes. He's like, you've reached the top 1.5% and you've not even like scratched the surface of like the best possible guest. And I was like, yeah, that's a really like fair comment. So he's like, your quality's good, but like imagine your quality was amazing. So like a James Smith automatically gets to speak to whoever else, despite the fact he's done less than like 50 podcast episodes, whatever. But he's like a super interesting guy with a massive social profile. So straight away, he's good at podcasting and he's got good quality guests. So he goes straight up. So his consistency doesn't even need to be there, or not to the same extent.
Exactly, man. And I think we'll leave on this note. Like the way forward, I think, is video and in person. It is. It just has to be. It is because.
But then Chris has built his podcast, Modern Wisdom, pretty much
on
entirely
fucking
over
Skype.
Skype. Yes, Skype is a mad
I saw,
platform.
before we got on this, I looked at it and I saw he recorded James Smith on Skype, and I was like, I literally just looked at it being like,
Chris was
fair
on my
fucks.
podcast, episode 1. We did it on Zoom, and he was like, "You should really consider Skype." And I was like, "Really, Chris? Like, I use Zoom every day in work, and it's pretty decent." And he was like, "No, Skype is the one." And then he has loads of video stuff that he's doing in the background to tidy it up. He's got great equipment that he's recording with, and like with his camera set up and his lights and whatever else. So it kind of negates the need. It negates a little bit of the fact that the platform's not as good as like a StreamYard, which we're using.
I think he has someone as well in the room to switch lens. I thought. I don't know.
Yeah, potentially.
Because I know a lot of guys. I've been on shows who have people that do that. They just literally like switch. So it's easy. I'm gonna wrap up here, man. We could keep on going and we should keep on going another time. But yeah, man, you're a legend. I appreciate it.
Mate, I appreciate it. Of nice free flowing one. Lots of different topics we touched on, and yeah, there'll definitely be a round 3 on this podcast, and there'll be a round 2 on mine soon.